What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to come in and drop some comment on some recent developments that's currently happening around Russia, or which I strongly believe are happening around Russia. And the first of them is being about the airliner recently being shot down. Um, there were some survivors, but more or less the gist of the stories go. There was an airliner taking off from Azerbaijan, headed towards Russia. It was damaged, ended up popping up in Kazakhstan. So this is all taking place in the Caspian Sea area. Now, the reason why I think this is revolving around Russia is because if you remember, my grand thesis was the West is seeking to put pressure on Russia. They want to bring Russia into the fold, but they don't want to bring a strong Russia into the fold or independent Russia into the fold. They want to bring an acquiescent or more docile Russia into the fold. They don't want to break Russia. Why would you break Russia up? It's kind of what you need. And you're going to break it up into what? Russia solves a lot of issues for the West right now with the rising powers of China and India. So this is why they want to seek to have that influence. It also eliminates a lot of competition for energy resources within Europe. If America can go ahead and make Russia a junior partner in its Western alliance to deal with these rising developing powers. Now, to do so, they kind of have to chip away at Russia bit by bit by bit. And I saw the collapse of Syria being um, one of the most serious incursions so far. Of course, you have the war in Ukraine being the big one, right? This is very ambitious for the West to try to take Ukraine away from Russia, and they've been doing a relatively good enough job in creating a Ukrainian identity separate from that of Russia, if not through all these years. So much of the new Ukraine, so much of its identity is going to be embedded in the concept of we are not Russians, we fought them for our independence. So there is growing a new Ukrainian identity, and that's one thing this long drawn out dramatic war is causing. But when you have the fall of Syria, you have a staunch ally, an ally that really committed completely, unlike Iran, which I think Iran talks a big game, and they give enough to avoid suspicion, but they don't give enough, I think, to be above suspicion. I feel as though they talk more than they do, and especially with the fall of Syria, where they didn't even, I don't want to say bust a grape, but you really saw no real defense of Bashar Assad. Of course, the Russians are bogged down in Ukraine. They got a lot going on with NATO on their doorsteps, but it's almost as if Iran opened a door on in Syria, and Bashar Assad knew that it was time to go. He had no real strong resistance to support his leadership, and the country almost fell overnight, one could say. So, with the fall of Syria, Russia really has no real strong allies that it can lean on that can really support them and expand their reach. Um, Belarus is the extension of Russia, but a very, very poor substitute to Syria, which could get Russia to the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, Belarus uh, is in Eastern Europe, but Russia's already in Eastern Europe. You know, it's only so much that it can do. You know, that's why I say it's only a kind of like extension or appendage of what Russia can do. But Syria really changed the game because Syria gave Russia a strong foothold in the Middle East, and from that foothold in the Middle East, they can expand to the Mediterranean without going through the Black Sea, sealed off by Turkey and Greece, two NATO allies. They were able to go through the Caucasus via Armenia. They were able to continue down or through the Caspian. They were able to establish themselves by air as need be in Syria, and then extend that influence to the Mediterranean. In ipso facto, go into Turkey. I mean, into Africa, and I really think that's why when I see all these francophone countries falling, I think it's only two ways they can go. Are they going to flip into the Commonwealth like you have with uh, Benin and or is it Togo and Rwanda, or they're just going to fall to the Turks, to Turkey, because I think Turkey's been doing a lot of work in Africa. So I think like you have that situation. It is Togo and Rwanda, which are now part of the British Commonwealth, which were former Francophones. So as you see, French influence wane in Africa. Supposedly the Russians were supposed to come in those places such as Chad, Burkina Faso, Niger. But what you might see in a few years down the line is the people that really benefit is going to be Turkey as they continue to grow in strength and strength to strength. Don't forget, Turkey was one of the major proponents of the overthrow of Assad, and they're believed to be one of the major backers of HTS, the organization which took over the country. So this airline is believed to be. So Russia has failed to build a strong alliance to insulate itself. They just lost a major strategic location on the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, in Syria. And I think the pressure is really ramping up on these guys, and they really have to do something. And they're not putting on full pressure in Ukraine, or maybe they limit themselves by saying they just wanted the Russian speaking regions of Ukraine. So maybe they've limited the offense they can take, but they're bogged down nevertheless in Ukraine. And you have a situation where this airline was shot down, and some people are saying it's bullet holes, etc., fragments, and it looks like it was attacked. Some people say it hit birds. Some people believe already before the investigation has started, hey, this was the Russians. They shot down another airline. Now, who knows what the situation was, why this was done? I'm assuming, for all it could be just natural air defense. Maybe the plane mimic a certain type of behavior which the Russians believe were a threat. Maybe the Russians were involved in it, but it looks very suspicious, and it looks like the Russians are very anxious. And what was very interesting about this airline is I said, okay, now that Syria is down, I really think the West is going to try to infiltrate, because that's really the strategic goal right here, right? Is to get behind or flank Russia, get behind the Urals. And to do that, you got to go to Caspian and get to Central Asia, because then you will have NATO in the Baltics, NATO in the Balkans, and then you got Turkey, you got NATO in the Caspian, Central Asia. That's almost surrounding the demographic acumen of Russia, so that everything's going to be trapped west of the Urals and between NATO and the West, right? So the eastern border will be the Ural Mountains, and then you have NATO in the West, and then they'll be so bogged down, and then you can just really squeeze that pressure, whether that's commercially, one can say militarily, even though it'll be very hard. You can't really invade Russia because it will be such a tough fight, and they are a nuclear power. But diplomatic pressure on the elites of the country to try to force a regime change. But just this whole concept of pressure, once you establish this apparatus of physical pressure to create this almost foreboding feeling of pressure to try to force some type of change of leadership that's more acquiescence to Western leadership style. And to do that, as I said, you want to go through the Caucasus and get to Central Asia. And they've already started that with Armenia and Azerbaijan being a stronger player. Azerbaijan's very closely linked to Turkey. And you got to think, okay, well, in Central Asia, who can the West lean on? You would imagine they're number one. It's about 3 countries there that they have an option for: Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan probably be a far fetched because it's so close to Russia geographically, and Turkmenistan is kind of a hermit kingdom that they got going on, and then you have Uzbekistan, which is kind of the demographic heartland of Central Asia. So I think Uzbekistan, a country that many people have seen develop economically and its growth rates, and with the population and the demand of population, that really is kind of a great suitor for somebody the West would come in and try to say, hey, if you work with us, we can build some relations. All these countries are former parts of the USSR, etc. These are Islamic countries, but they are Turkic countries. And NATO has been really winning so far, building this alliance with the Turks in Turkey and in Azerbaijan, and strengthening themselves in this part of the world. The other instance that occurred was the cutting of a cable line between Finland and Estonia. And I definitely Sometimes it seems as though the West might have done it, and this time it seemed like the Russians would have done it. It was a cutting of the cable. So, of course, there's submarine cables that really connect the world. This is really the great strategic infrastructure of the world is the submarine cables that connect various countries, such as through communications, transmissions. So, Wi-Fi, and much more as far as communications. So these submarine cables are very vital to communication between ally and talking with your allies, etc., and communicating. And somebody went and cut these undersea cable between Finland and Estonia. Finland and Estonia, although close, right? Their capitals stare across each other in the Gulf of Finland, but these countries are separated geographically by land by Russia. St. Petersburg sits between these two countries, right? And the reason why I think the Russians might have some fingerprints on this is because if you can cut that communication cable, you can kind of isolate Finland to the north from Estonia to the south. So both of these countries are on Russia's border, and they're both are uh, NATO members. So it could be the Russians doing a dry run, or maybe it was the Russians trying to test out the response to see what happened. But I clearly think they're feeling the pressure, and I wouldn't be surprised. It has not been proven yet. I make sure I add that caveat. I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian had some say in what's going on as they continues to try to find a way out of this tightening net that they have been thrown in. Um, don't forget they're still under economic sanctions as well. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Comment below, like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. But we'll continue to monitor this situation and report on you what it appears to us, what's really going on with so many of these travesties and tragedies occurring around the world, especially in that part of the world, and if they actually are not isolated incidents, but some greater network of a strategic implementation of a strategic plan. So we'll continue to watch. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. If you enjoy the content, until next time, take care. Back to up.